Right after our protagonist casually devours a freshly forged sword, the story flashes back to explain his tragic origin. Growing up, his mom constantly hyped up their caravan family bloodline, claiming they were a legendary clan of royal sword masters and invincible war gods. She begged him to restore their fallen glory, but reality hit hard, and instead of grinding stats like an overpowered hero, our guy is stuck playing farming simulator in a rural village. After realizing his supposed legendary ancestor Lion Caravan is not in any official history books, and their family relics look completely fake, he watches a village elder randomly choke on his lunch and decides this peaceful NPC life is actually fine. He completely drops the hero dream and heads into the market to buy supplies and a birthday doll for a local girl. But the exact moment he leaves, a mysterious assassin pulls up to the village and starts cutting down everyone in sight. This enemy is on a pure extermination mission to erase the entire territory. When our young master finally gets back that night, the farm has been reduced to ruins. His butler friend covers his eyes to shield him from the horror and drops the devastating news that this monster wiped out half the caravans in 10 minutes flat, just because someone ordered a hit on their bloodline. And that was how half of the caravans disappeared in a single disaster. We then see a house. The young master cannot understand all that carnage and cries when suddenly he hears his mother, a small glimmer of hope. His mother's embrace brought a sense of relief. The young man does not understand the reason for all that, but the tragedy was just beginning. For some reason, the swordmaster who attacked the village did not hurt his parents. The monster promised to return after a month, so he asked them to leave that place. The young man does not understand what crime he committed for that man to be doing that, but the swordmaster merely said he was following orders. Then, one by one, the villagers began to leave the village. It was the only way for the family to stay alive, but all that responsibility had crushed the boy's father. His mother then asks Arhan to accompany the butler as far away as possible. Our young man cannot understand and asks his father and mother to come along. His mother and father will stay in the territory to face the enemy, but the boy just wants everyone to stay together. She asks the boy to remember the stories his father told about just and protective guardians, and that it was all nothing but lies. She asks the boy to make a promise to never pick up a sword and not to think about revenge. The butler then says the carriage is ready, and the woman asks him to take good care of the boy. Then, the butler holds the boy while he screams for his mother. The man smashes his head against the bookshelf, and we see his father trembling in despair. The woman asks him to stop doing that and says she will be with him until the end. In the carriage, the boy and the old man depart. The butler talks about how that man is a calamity, a natural disaster that not even humans can overcome. He asks the boy to accept that tragedy and not forget to live, as that is what his parents wanted. The old man looks back and sees that no one is there. The young man had vanished. The young man runs back as he does not want to abandon his parents and thinks about taking revenge on the Calamity Man by driving an arrow through his heart. Arhan arrives at his house and sees his father's head right on top of the house. The boy then comes face to face with his family's killer. That swordmaster asks if he came back to die and ends up showing mercy. Arhan is traumatized by that situation and pulls out his crossbow. The monster, in the blink of an eye, off the boy's head, but that was nothing more than a tragedy in his mind. The boy then drops his weapon to the ground and falls to his knees. He puts his hand on his neck, unable to understand that hallucination. The monster asks his age and says he is a lucky boy, as he will not kill him today. His enemy tells him to sink into despair, and that if he continues his bloodline, he will return, because the caravans must be erased. The young man then runs to see his mother and cries for not being able to do anything. We see the sword from the story's glowing blue, and something was asking him to show respect. Then, the old man from the painting appears, talking about his lineage. 12 months have passed since he dug the graves of everyone in that land. He had spent every day of that year perfecting his blade of vengeance, because that man was the pinnacle, a true transcendent being. His name was Carlos, the Swordmaster. That was the title of the monster who ripped out his soul in his home. Still, the truth remains shrouded in shadows. Regardless of the truth, reality is immutable, as no one will return. The boy then does not understand that feeling. The weight of the enigmas finally began to weigh on his mind, and something impossible was manifesting before his eyes. Someone was telling him to show a little respect to the blood running in his veins. It was the figure he had rejected as a mere fable, an ancestral legend standing right in front of him. The young man had already heard some rumors, but that was too real for his imagination. The old man could feel the furious storm in the boy's chest and asks if he is afraid to see an ancestor. He cannot believe he was standing before the patriarch who forged his family's name, the legendary conqueror, Lion Caravan. The furious boy asks his ancestor why he waited until the world turned upside down and why he let everyone die. Lion talks about having observed the boy in silence, having noticed a very scarce talent surrounded by despair. He watched the boy with his sword every single day. The old man witnessed a will that refused to be extinguished by the winds of despair. Lion speaks about the malice in the boy's eyes and that he has finally matured as much as he wanted. The ancestor's patience had reached its limit, and he could no longer stand to see his lineage massacred. His blood was boiling, and he was eager to tear limbs apart. His ancestor then asks him to pursue the retribution of a ghost. Something echoed in the boy's head about not touching it. The Swordmaster is a divine anomaly that surpassed the human threshold, and even among the elite, is a titan who remains at an unreachable peak. Even in his era of slaughter, few could stand toe-to-toe with a guy like that. No one in this current era has enough strength to finish him off. And as time passes, his shadow will only grow larger and darker. Our boy understood the abyss of strength between the two, but even so, he wanted justice. He only thought that he should remain as a desperate spectator once again. But from that moment on, his destiny will change. His ancestor will turn him into a true machine because he is the last caravan and must execute that assassin. There is only one path for those who carry this blood: devour the sword and inherit the lineage of steel. Caravan blood is a mixture of human and dwarf. The boy stands before the sword in its hottest state. His ancestor explains that it all started with him. Even though the magnitude of the dwarves did not manifest in height, something was still carved into their DNA: the power to assimilate the blade. By ingesting a sword, the user assimilates the memories and secret arts of its former masters. This is the hidden mechanism that propelled the caravans to the top and spawned a dynasty of sword masters. The boy needs to absorb the power by consuming the metal. Our boy thinks that reality is defined by results and not by logic, turns to his ancestor, and asks how to devour steel. The old man says the process is primitive, but it is necessary to heat the edge of the sword until it softens, and then simply chew and swallow. Arhan is a bit skeptical, but there is no other way than to trust the old man. After the bite, he bursts into flames. It felt like he was eating peppers. Despite the unbearable pain of swallowing hot metal, the contract was sealed. The boy never stopped thinking about everything he had been through, and then he devoured the sword more and more, until the end. Our protagonist then swears to become a sword master who will tear out that demon's heart. The boy cannot believe that, after doing that, he is alive. Despite the pain of swallowing hot iron, everything was fine. He did not believe it was real, but realizes it was all true, as there would not be a dagger there otherwise. The ancestor said that for his pathetic body, his mental fortitude was brave, because even among his ancestors, many gave up because they could not stand the burning. The old man questions if the boy now believes him and that he is not a hallucination, as he was standing before the great founder. Lion asks the young man to call him simply Master. Arhan questions his ancestor about inheriting the great power his father had told him about by consuming swords. The boy does not understand, as he felt that nothing changed. Lion explains that a minor problem occurred, since our boy does not understand what happened. The old man explains that, over several generations, their blood and the power to ingest swords had weakened significantly. So, to put it simply, the boy's current state cannot process the sword's essence. Lion asks the boy if that is all he has to say. Our protagonist was a bit sad about the result and his body's limits, but he was happy because he found another way. In other words, the boy just needs to find more food. The old man is impressed by the boy's level and explains that the more worn and used they are, the better. The boy asks the ancestor to take him to a place with old, discarded weapons. His ancestor says that place had a horrible atmosphere. Arhan says that all the trash ended up in that place, but that it was a good start, as there would be many swords to consume there. The old man explains he was used to devouring swords and axes of fallen soldiers to get stronger and stronger, and for some reason, he remembered that time. He reflects that, despite all the battles where countless lives are cut in half, a single bright point of light is always left behind. Lion then finds something and asks the young man to pick it up. He points and says that is the sword he must eat. 1 month later, we see a group entering an abandoned house. That group was nothing but a bunch of thieves. One of his colleagues says someone really lives there and shows them the clothes. That bandit is impressed by the smell of the clothes. That bunch of perverted thieves only wanted fun, when suddenly someone tells them to stop. Someone was lurking in the shadows, saying those things belonged to his mother. The boy then orders them to put the things down, as he would like to talk. The gang of bandits mocks the boy. Arhan asks if they want food or a place to stay, because if so, he accepts those bandits as neighbors. The thief cannot stand it, thinks the boy is messing with him, and charges at the boy. Our hero then, in an instant, plunges the sword into the thief's belly and says, "You are not visitors, "You are intruders." The boy asks his master if that is the sword he must devour. The sword has a strange shape, looking more like a needle. His master tells the boy that the weapon's purpose is not to cut, but to pierce the opponent's vital points. Our young man is impressed with that sword. The ancestor looks at the boy and sees that the youth prefers a spear. His master says that, for his weak body, nothing is as useful as the memories trapped in that blade. The old man mentions that the sword's last former owner defeated more than 2,000 enemies and did it with a woman's body, which is even more fragile than the boy's. Lion then asks the protagonist to show respect for the sword and devour it. That sword seemed light, but what was really imbued in it was the weight of several lives by inheriting that woman's memories. In a cut, we see the last thing the child remembered was the house on fire. Someone was calling out, asking if Mary had woken up. When that 10-year-old child opened her eyes, everything changed. Her relatives were unrecognizable from the fire when they told her she barely survived. The girl in the bed wished she had died with her family. After losing everything in an instant, the child ended up in an orphanage. She met the orphanage's revered figure, the goddess of fire, who saw fire as salvation, and the child hit rock bottom once again. The child had lost everything to the fire, and yet had to live in a place that treated fire as salvation. She had not yet escaped the flames. The days in that place were peacefully horrific. The other children commented and mocked the girl's face, and she could no longer bear it, wishing for death. There was no way out, because the fire was always there, whether she closed her eyes or kept them open. Until, one night, she saw someone practicing fencing. That made her forget her worst moments, even for a moment. The young man's name was Hegel. He was a former swordsman and wandering knight who worked at the orphanage. The girl would not dare speak a word to a grumpy old man, but even so, she ran to the man and asked him how to become like him. Our girl wished to learn that. It was a step toward living. The man looked at her and said that it would not help her live, especially as a girl, and that type of blade would only end up hurting her. But the girl insisted on wanting to learn it, as it would help her stop being afraid of the fire. Hegel asks the girl to choose a sword, and if she can swing the sword, he will teach her. The girl looks at the swords and asks if she really needs to swing it. He then says there is no other way. The girl reaches out, grabs that pointed sword, and points it at him. The girl then says she will do whatever it takes. That was the first thrust. In the present, our boy plunges the sword into one of the thieves, and he falls to the ground. His other companions watch and do not understand what is happening. The boy then says he no longer needs to talk to those bandits. Lion, over the last few months, only focused on one thing with the boy, which was a physical training routine, as the old man had not taught him any sword techniques. His ancestor is impressed by the boy's execution of the thrust and concludes that the boy is on the right path. The strike landed by the boy had hit that thief's lung. Given the boy's situation, there is no logical reason for him to be able to use a strike like that. There was only one explanation: the memories of the needle's former owner, Mary. From that day on, Hegel became the girl's silent instructor. He taught her how to position her feet, the rhythm of a fight, and the cold necessities of survival. His style was not rigid or academically indoctrinated. It was personified fencing, wild and with an indomitable spirit. It possessed a raw power that was more than enough to captivate. The young girl broke free in the shadow of her fears, and she truly admired the way he handled the sword. As the years passed, her master says the time is coming for the girl to leave those walls, and when that moment comes, he asks her to go witness the greatness of the world. That was the final mission her master left. Her master was very grateful to have traveled that journey alongside her, as the girl owed him everything, but his time to rest had come. Following her master's final instruction, she turned her back on the orphanage and headed into the unknown. Mary did not take long to build the reputation of a renowned mercenary. She didn't understand if it was the fact that her weapon was an assassin's needle or because she was a woman, but the girl became known as the sewing gypsy. The boy notices a strange phenomenon which seems to have been invoked by the ancestor. Mary's lived experiences whispered in the boy's head, while the bandit begged for his life. Our boy executes the enemy with his needle. Our protagonist had finished his first job and taken his first life as well. Arhan feels a strange emptiness, as there was no agitation or guilt, only the situation happening before him and occupying his thoughts. The young man only got that opening because his enemy did not see him as a threat, but he realizes the bandits seem to think they are in a better position. He doesn't understand why the bandits are hesitating to attack him, despite the difference in numbers. His master says they were paralyzed by fear because his skill was not that of a rookie. A minor dose of fear keeps a man alive, but an excess blinds even the ability to think. The enemies thought they were facing an unstoppable force, and that, to them, he is no longer a child, but an assassin. In an instant, the boy understands and charges at the intruders. One of the thieves does not want him to get closer. The boy, very fast, dodges the attack and executes a strike right in the bandit's neck. Mary's thoughts whispered in his head. Arhan charges towards another thief, lands behind the enemy, and pierces his arm. Mary avoided imitating things. She only honed her gifts. The brute tries to hit her, but her greatest asset was her flexibility and a physique as agile as a dancer's, from her stance to any trajectory. Our boy sends one more thief to the grave. The bandit is in shock and wants to know what monster was standing before him. That night, his master asks the boy if that was enough to clear his doubts, because if he continues that way, 4 untrained bandits will be nothing to him. Lion says that what strengthens and makes you stronger is life-threatening combat. Our boy is impressed by what his master had said because it was all true. Then everything makes sense to the boy. Mary's memories, her battles, and her life experiences. He can understand a little better with what kind of heart Mary always fought against the world. It is a power that gets stronger the more you understand your opponent, the power of digestion. Leon says he never lied when it comes to the sword, and guarantees that everything will get worse. The master asks if the boy can continue on that path. Our boy's desire is to shove the sword down Carlos's throat, so it didn't matter which path the boy takes forward. Our boy is then climbing a mountain. Lion asks where his courage from last night is, but that trait is one of the boy's strengths, as he has been like that since childhood. He explains to the boy that the path of the swordmaster has 5 stages. The beginner's sword, which can be called an introduction to the sword, the realm reached by those who possess martial talent, the swordwalkers, the sword messengers, who have established themselves as powerful and serve as the axis of the battlefield, the sword specialist, a hero who can single-handedly change the course of a war, and those who gather above all others, revered as gods. In the realm of the sword heart, the sword master. The master asks his descendant where he thinks he belongs now. The boy smiles and says he knows his own level well. The prerequisite for the sword master is mana manipulation. It is a necessary reservoir to handle mana, a second heart, the formation of a mana heart. His master says the boy is still just an amateur, and that this training is meant to lead him to a beginner's path and create a mana heart. The boy is scared by that, not understanding the risk he is taking. Our young man does not know how it was in his master's time, but there was a way to get a mana heart just by drinking a potion. Even the noble ladies learned fencing as self-defense and managed to form a mana heart. The young man asks his master why not choose an easier path. His master says it is not a very difficult task, but to exert great power, a strong vessel is required, and that would be impossible in an ordinary person's vessel. To reach his goal, there is only one thing he must possess: a heart of steel. Lion says there is only one way to create it, which is to constantly push oneself to the brink of death. He says that, among his descendants, only a few manage to endure this training to the end. However, those who overcome all the training become sword masters. Leon asks the boy if he feels a little motivated now. Our hero replies that it is more than enough, and that the mana heart he will conquer will be different. In a village east of the Verdi-Campbell region, in a bar, some people comment on the caravan village. The gossips say it is a haunted village, as there is a dangerous entity in the west. All the bandits who set foot there disappeared. There were many rumors about that village, warning that if they didn't want to die, they shouldn't enter there. The strange subject then becomes interested in that place. The young man kept his training very strict. Our boy also dealt with unwelcome visitors. Amidst training of terrible pain, he passed them all without failing, with all his strength. Our boy, despite everything, failed to form the mana heart, but a change is coming. Our boy's senses were incredibly sharp. It's not just his basic senses, but also judgment and concentration in handling a situation. He was in a mode incomparable to before, and when he wielded that needle, for a brief moment, time seemed to stop for him. Between his past and present, the reason for the change is just one thing: being able to feel mana. Reaching that power, even without a mana heart, was thanks to the needle's power. Our boy just wanted to know what his power would be when he reached the next level. His teacher says there is a long road before he stops being a rookie. Only when he forms his mana heart and becomes a sword beginner will he understand the greatness of the power. Only then will our boy be the master of the needle and stand on equal footing. If he continues to improve his physical abilities and build his offensive and defensive mastery, he will reach the realm of superhumans, the realm the world calls the swordwalker level. His master said that, even though it is the first stage after the beginner level, he will notice the difference. The boy asks his master about what he is feeling and about that man in the territory, questioning if he would be a swordwalker. Leon says that man is on a completely different level, which means our boy wouldn't last even a second against him. Our boy has no choice, as abandoning that place is not an option. Even becoming so lonely, it is the only place where memories exist. His master only asks him to get strong, as that way he will get more answers. There is no use holding on to the feelings he has now. Feed on the challenge and become as hard as steel. Only then will no one laugh at your words. And so his master's words reached him. The man points his sword at our boy, for if he thinks of running away, he will die instantly. After that mysterious man stepped into the territory, observing him became a new part of the daily routine. What became clear is that the man never touched even the smallest of ornaments. He lived a simple life, only with the belongings he brought. Another characteristic is that he would get lost in thought watching the sunset, or otherwise he prayed. Our boy concluded that that individual was a knight. His master says that man reached the sword walk and follows the rules, noting that people so inflexible are rare to find unless they are knights. The boy thinks he is just a bad neighbor. The point is that man is much better than those invaders. Leon says the nature of honor is highly subjective. It is decided by its master's will. Then his master teaches the true meaning of a knight. A knight is a swordsman who uses honor to exert violence. An executioner performs efficient assassinations based on sword techniques passed down through generations. You cannot be blinded by the empty sound of the word knight. Judge the essence of the target itself. Doubt is the precious talent you possess. The young man is left with his mouth hanging open at that news. Since he was little, Arhan relentlessly dove in search of the truth behind the stories his father told. Even with difficulties, he always found the answer by eliminating variables. Doubt is the refusal to be carried away by what one simply hears. It is the attitude of using all means, methods, and thoughts to reach the truth, and those who do not know doubt can never surpass their limits. His master asks the boy not to lose this trait, because this is his talent for the sword, and he approves of it. Our boy never lowered his guard and slowly approached the invader, simply to invite him to be a neighbor, but things played out differently. The man knew the boy was watching him and told him not to run, because if he turned his back, he would end up dying. Arhan did not expect things to end like this. The sewing gypsy, the nickname, was more well-known than he imagined. Thanks to that, Mary received recruitment offers from groups and mercenaries and, on the other hand, was frequently harassed by bandits. Amidst so many thoughts, one caught his attention. Maybe she had gone beyond the level of a mercenary using a peculiar sword, and Mary had become a truly strong swordswoman. At a certain point, she realized this was arrogance, and it wasn't long before a knight arrived asking if she was the so-called gypsy. The knight mocked the girl for having such a weak sword. It seemed the girl was proud of her own skills. He said she was nothing more than a mediocre mercenary and that if she wasn't a woman, she would be no different from an insect and would have died on the spot. The only rule protecting Mary was that that Knight of the Red Falcons did not take the lives of women and children. The knight left and told her to be grateful to chivalry. At that moment, Mary felt a giant wall between her and the knight. Later, she learned that that stage was that of a sword walker. What worried our boy the most was the fact that he was even weaker than Mary. The knight headed towards our hero, and his presence was overwhelming. Due to that adrenaline, the boy's heartbeats grew stronger. He could see the mana expelled by the invader's body. Our boy remained frozen before the sword walker. He asks our young man what the rumors about that place are, because if there wasn't a valid reason, he would be considered his enemy. The boy says it was to see if he was a guest or an invader, but the knight thinks that is too specific. The boy explains to him what happened in that place, about the rumors and the invaders he executed himself. He points out that, unlike the others who stepped into that place, the knight seemed too powerful for his level, and that's why he was watching him all this time. The man asks if, even with the difference in skills, he would oppose him. Arhan says that place held the memories of his entire life. The knight seems to understand that the place is precious to the boy, and that the child had gone through very difficult times. So he tells the boy that he needs to declare his stance. He asks the boy to lower his guard, that he will also sheathe his sword and tell his story. The young man remembers his master's words that he must incessantly push his body to the brink of death. Our hero refuses and says he needs the sword to have a bit of defense. The knight doesn't understand that, if he really wanted to, he would have already hurt the boy. The knight talks about being the first to sheathe his sword, as he must maintain his honor. The young man knows this, but backing down is not an option, as he remembers his motives. It is something the young man swore he would not give up on before fighting. That knight stared intently, noticing how much the boy had trained. To the invader, that boy posed no threat whatsoever, but he is impressed by the young man's look. Our invader charges at Arhan. The knight's strategy was just to disarm the boy, but with a dark look, the boy deflects the knight's sword. Arhan's breathing had changed and waves of mana had surged. Our boy had formed a massive mana heart. The knight is impressed by how the boy deflected his sword. He then wonders if it is due to the mana heart, but notices that the boy's was incredibly rigid and solid. like steel. One thing was certain to him. The boy was coming with everything. Arhan takes a deep breath and thinks it was just luck dodging that attack. Our boy understands that the knight only wanted to disarm him, so he noticed the trajectory and applied the strike correctly to block it. Using that technique made it feel like his body was splitting apart because there was a truly desperate power gap between the two. However, what he had awakened at that moment was his mana heart, the heart of steel. Our boy realizes his attacks will not reach the knight, so he will need to create a path. And on that day, when Mary collapsed before that walker, she had faced an insurmountable limit head-on. The first thing that came to her mind was her master's voice. Hegel used to say that some swordsmen look at the sword and consider the limit insurmountable, but that those were nothing more than excuses to avoid facing those conflicts. The master says that walls exist solely to be broken. The girl cries at her master's advice, asking not to give up, determined to stand firm and face anything. Despite all the damage and helplessness, continuing to swing the sword will surely break past that wall. Believe in yourself, that's all you need to do. If you hold a sword and live an intense life, eventually you will face a wall. Our boy was overwhelmed by a crushing sense of despair, where taking even one step forward felt like a challenge. His desire was to turn his back and run away, and yet the boy intended to face the situation head-on. What echoed in the boy's head was why he needed to go through that. The path didn't need to be perfect, just reaching it was enough. Arhan analyzes his opponent in every way, because by putting all this puzzle together, he will create an opening. It is all part of how to face adversity and keep moving forward. That is what it means to be a caravan. Be strong, and then show your power to the world. Our boy charges at the invader, even with fear. Despite all the tragedy, there are truly desperate moments where even breathing is painful. That is how he knew that Mary's fear was not of the fire, but of her own weakness and the habit of constantly running away. Her only option was to propel her life, her family, and her future, because the world is full of fire. And if anyone asked if she overcame that, there was only one answer. There was no more fear of fire nor of the world. Even if I fall and can't win, I can face it. So the boy advances towards the invader. Mary had followed her master's advice. Holding that needle, she was able to become free just like him. But she is not sure if she lived an ideal life, because the world is infested with monsters stronger than her. There were walls much higher that she would never be able to overcome alone, and even so, until the last moment of her life, there was not a single wall she turned her back on. When her time comes, she will also tell her story, because she is no longer afraid of the fire. Our boy then finds himself next to a campfire. The cloak covering him was the knight's, and in the end, he had failed to surpass him. His master says that effort was worthy of a caravan, and that, despite the painful defeat, he completely digested the needle. He felt his muscles were much more flexible, and his senses much sharper. Arhan felt as if he had become a veteran mercenary. He realizes the master's intention with that sword was to show Mary's life and the will to never give up. He thinks if it wouldn't have been better if the master had told him from the beginning. When suddenly the knight returns and asks about the young master. The knight smiles and says there is no misunderstanding between them. His master says that man will not hurt him and that he knows what the boy went through. The knight says he will tell his story, but first, the boy should lower his guard. The reason he went to that place is because he cannot be a threat to the youth. Arhan cannot understand the real reason behind all that. The knight said his name is Patel and that he was already retired, being just a wanderer. He also said he is a sick patient, on the brink of death, and that even the greatest mages of medicine confirmed his life ends in less than a month. Petal says he is just a man waiting for death, and asks the boy if he can tell a bit of his story. So, after that commotion, the two talked a bit. Very different from his style, Sir Patel was not very eloquent, and it certainly was not simple communication. But to the young man, that mess felt like genuine sincerity. Our boy understood the knight's purpose was just to seek a place to die. Patel says his real reason for leaving the order was not to become a burden when his life ended, and that his desire for his final moments was to spend quiet time. Leon says the knight is not lying, because even at that moment his heart was being devoured by the disease, and when the disease reaches his mana heart, everything will end. Patel asks what the young master thinks, and he says it is enough to have him as a neighbor. The knight and the young master greet each other, stating his name, Arhan. Arhan welcomes Sir Patel to the neighborhood, and the time for the next step has finally arrived, as there is no better place than that one. After a few days, the young man asks his master when he would instruct him in fencing, but his master merely asked him to go somewhere else. Thanks to Sir Patel, the young man doesn't need to worry about intruders at the mansion. He asks the master why travel so far. His master tells him to stop asking so many questions, as he knows what he is doing, pointing out that a common training is not conventional, and that the priority was digesting a new sword for his growth. His master states that the destination is the perfect place to seek this growth, a place where, regardless of status or origins, only those those who desire bloody conflicts gather. In his master's time, that place was named the Arena. In the steel city of Firma, symbolized by the Iron Kingdom with its great metallurgy, all the kingdom's equipment was made there, in the sacred land of the sword. However, the true driving force of that city was something else, an arena. Lion notices that the name of the place had changed, but the heat there was the same. In that place, completely different fights had happened. There were beast duels, savage duels, and even interspecies duels. They were truly fervent and very violent duels. It was the true duel of combat. The gladiators possessed various personalities and techniques. Victor, one of those gladiators, took the life of a loser and claimed everything left behind as spoils of war in a frenzied fight to the death. The spectators drank, bet, and cheered with highly heated excitement. It is a city built by pools of spilled blood. That was Firma. The boy understands there is no better place than that, because there he could devour the weapons of defeated gladiators. Lion says the young master's thinking is too simple, and that if that worked, he would have already eaten every weapon left in that dump. He says that devouring without thinking doesn't work, because if the young man goes around eating just anything, he would be consumed by the sword's scrambled memories and lose himself. He must be the one in control, not the sword. We see the two move forward into the heat of the fight. The woman asks the young man if it is his first time participating in the arena and warns that he needs to go to the player registration desk and receive a medal first, as entering without it was impossible. Arhan asks the reason for a medal. His master cannot believe what he is hearing, as in his time something like that didn't happen. The friendly girl tells the young master to get his medal and return to the line. The medal was defined by its color, serving as a sort of record of matches, fame, and status. The order of these classes starts from the top: black, white, platinum, gold, silver, and copper. The young man received his copper medal. Our hero cannot believe his classification. It was really quite different from everything his master had told him. In his master's time, the arena was totally different. His master is incredulous at that new class weight system. The young man says it must all be for money, and thinks that if the arena were truly so brutal, no gladiators would be left for the spectators to bet their money on. Things were really different because everyone fought at their own level. The arena results became a symbolic landmark that people visited from afar, which allowed the current metropolis of Firma to flourish. Furthermore, even if you win a duel, you do not take the loser's life, a rule among the gladiators. His master gets increasingly annoyed with that soft era, but says it will be a good experience for the boy. He suggests that, until then, it would be good to look around the ironworks. The master explains that the boy's sword is prone to breaking, so it would be better to have a spare. When his master asks, "What is that?" Arhan doesn't know what his master is talking about until he suddenly sees several weapons on display. He asks why there are weapons in the middle of the street like that. Someone arrives commenting about it being the boy's first time seeing the Hall of Fame. Our hero turns around and sees Tom, who was the caretaker of that corridor. He asks the young man if he can give an explanation about that place. The young man notices his master is looking at those weapons. Arhan greets him and asks for Tom's kindness. Tom says those displayed armaments belonged to great gladiators, and that although they were old, worn, and without function as weapons, they were there for honor and fighting spirit. Tom tells the boy that if he has any questions, he can ask, as he is the manager of that place. Lion asks the boy to ask a question about whether there is any way to possess those swords. His master had already found the next weapon he must devour. Our hero was at the entrance for arena competitors and asks Tom how to get those swords. The manager says the only way is to prove to be a gladiator and have a classification consistent with the color of your medal. Every time your sword's ranking increases, you will be able to obtain a weapon. The weapon the master was looking at required a promotion to the silver rank. That corridor is a treasure chest. His master says that to others, they might just be weapons, but to the young man, those weapons are worth as much as gold. He asks the boy to go to the arena and get the sword with the promotion. Lion confesses that if it were up to him, he would steal the weapon, but the manager was no ordinary guy. To our hero, the manager just seemed like a gentle old knight. His master says the manager could use mana as an absolute defense armor, because he was a sword specialist. Arhan is frightened by the manager's qualification and asks why a human like him would be a manager. His master answers that people who reach that level are all eccentric and decides that robbing the corridor will be for another time. Lion says that despite all those changes, there is still one thing that remains the same in the arena: covering your face to hide your identity, status, and fame, and fighting solely as a gladiator. The young man doesn't think it's bad. Facing the situation that way made him free not to hesitate. An old hooded woman asks the young man what his arena pseudonym is. Arhan doesn't understand at first, and she explains that no one steps in there using their real name, as it would bring trouble. The boy chooses his name, and the old woman says she will pray for victory to follow his footsteps, Gladiator Lion. Low-rank matches did not build much expectation, except for gamblers. It was just a pastime between the big fights. Therefore, those who filled the stadium this time did not bring applause, but terrible boos and criticism. The crowd wanted it to end as quickly as possible. His master notices it was just humiliation and contempt for the weak. Our hero's mentality was strong, and that atmosphere did not intimidate him. The master speaks to the boy about the weight of carrying that name and his family's blood. The young man knows everything, and that is why he is certain he will win. The announcer declares the start of the rookie match and points to the young man, as it was his first time in the arena. The announcer talks about the great deeds of the gladiator the young man was going to face, and his name was Giant Tamer. Tamer mocked the boy's name, saying it was a waste to use his sword against that type of person. The giant makes a proposal to the boy to take off his mask and dance to the rhythm of his clapping. Only with that generosity would the giant preserve his neck. The giant kept thinking the boy was just there as a joke, yelling that he didn't care about the unspoken rules, and that was why he ended up killing the 3 guys he fought before. He says the winner's privilege is enjoying the best entertainment. The giant continues embarrassing the boy, treating him as a pastime. The announcer says it will be an interesting fight and tells the gladiators to get into their positions. Arhan tells the giant to take back what he said about his name and prepares for the attack. The giant continues to despise the boy, and the crowd questions the name chosen by the youth. The gladiator cracks a macabre smile, when suddenly, in the blink of an eye, the young man tears off the giant's fingers. Our boy asks the giant to just apologize for trashing his name, or else die. Arhan tears off his opponent's fingers. The furious giant throws the boy backward with a terrible attack and despairs upon seeing his fingers had been torn off. The crowd is happy with all that misfortune happening. Tamer could not understand how that boy had gotten so strong. He is frightened, thinking the boy is playing weak on purpose, and that it was all just the young man's strategy. The giant gets terribly furious and charges at the boy, but he could not land a single hit. What disturbed the giant the most was trying to understand exactly what he was fighting. Our boy executes 3 attacks on the giant's leg. Tamer tries to hit him again, but without success, and the gladiator cannot take it and falls to his knees. The young boy then makes an offer to the giant. He asks him to take off his ridiculous helmet and dance to the rhythm of his claps. Only then would he spare his head. Tamer, fearing for his life, takes off his helmet and pretends to accept the boy's proposal while trying to grab his sword, but in a second, his hand is pierced by the boy's needle. The boy says it would be better if he chose his next moves carefully, because there wouldn't be another opportunity. The giant, without his helmet, apologizes and begs for his life. The crowd doesn't comprehend what that was, and everyone goes crazy. In the stands, the crowd was already preparing their bets on the boy Lian, and everyone in that arena was calling his name. The manager, Tom, says he felt how extraordinary the boy was, and that he had made a connection with a promising gladiator, but something worried him, as too much attention in that place was frequently something like poison. Sometime later, the young man was talking to the registration girl. She said his performance was very good and that she had a proposal for him. The girl asks him if he would accept one more match for the promotion to the silver medal. Since our hero's debut, all matches have been a spectacle. The young man thought what the girl was offering him was very strange. The proposal was to duel an opponent of her choice. The girl says the young man wouldn't even need to try that hard, as he only needed to hold out for 3 minutes. She argues it is not a common situation and it is a rare opportunity. By leveling up, he will be able to fight stronger knights and earn more money. The girl was going crazy and saying he couldn't miss that opportunity. His master says that is nothing more than a tradition called the Rookie Crusher, a kind of filter to see the efficiency of newcomers. It was nothing but entertainment that lured rookies with the promise of promotion, only to pit them against people they couldn't withstand. Merely a freak show of rookies being massacred. His master advises him to refuse that offer, as a better one would soon appear. The young man, however, thirsty to reach his goal, accepts to fight anyone. Sometime later, the arena notified him of the chosen opponent. Her name was Black Bride, a graduate of a prestigious academy, undefeated and in the silver rank. She was an insane sword walker. The academy where she studied was one of the best. Just having the diploma automatically granted the knight rank. In other words, that opponent was superior in all aspects to our young man. Arhan took a look at the girl and realized she was well known, although she didn't show off her skills. And what worried the young man the most was that the opponents who fought her couldn't recover. His master says the person in the arena is really very smart, as she already knows it will be hard to last the 3 minutes. He says there is a name for that situation nowadays, which is the young man is Our hero says the bride probably wouldn't be stronger than Patel, who had reached the peak power of swordwalkers. But there were differences, because Patel had adapted to the boy's level out of honor, and with the black bride, he cannot expect that. The bored boy thanks his master for those terrible pieces of advice. Our hero could rely on his metallic mana heart and Mary's memories, only needing to endure enough of the 3 minutes. A hooded girl appears and calls the young man Little Gladiator. The young man is startled, as he couldn't sense her presence. The girl sported long dark hair and a sword that favored Eastern warriors. He was facing the black bride and didn't understand why she sought him out. Our young man says there is no little gladiator there. The girl then replies he is just making things complicated. She starts to fidget with her sword, and the boy quickly tries to react, but to no avail. The girl already had her sword at his neck. The girl says it is for him not to waste her time, mentions his reaction and the unique needle-shaped sword, stating her eyes do not deceive her. She just wanted to make a proposal for him to surrender, asking him not to be stupid and end up ruining his future. Our protagonist asks what will happen if he participates and what she will do. The girl says that will cost him dearly. The manager, Tom, notices a guest has arrived and asks what the boy is doing there at that hour. Arhan apologizes to the manager and ends up asking if he could take a sword from that hall to use. His master is in awe of that girl's talent, as most swordsmen stop at the swordwalker barrier, but for her, that wasn't a wall or even a minor obstacle. Her awakening to the next realm is not far off, as she is a genius. And, for his master to evaluate the girl so highly, it's because there is still a huge gap between them. But even so, giving up was never an option for the youth. Our hero says time waits for no one, and he needs to find the second sword. The young man asks the manager if he can take a sword from the hall. The manager talks to the boy and asks if it has to do with the promotion against the Black Bride. Our hero is amazed, as the manager already knew it was a match between promising gladiators. That manager says that, for a youth who just entered the arena, that seemed like a bad joke, and advises him to reconsider his decision. He explains that the Black Bride comes from a place known to overflow with martial talent, and was the best in her class, surpassing countless gladiators, being a natural-born genius. The gentle manager says the youth is a good gladiator, but it is too early to face her, and asks him to gain more experience before challenging her. The manager guarantees it and asks what the boy thinks. Our young man thanks Tom for the advice, but states that, despite his body trembling and praising the god Lepre, avoiding a combat out of fear would be betraying his gladiator's heart. He was there to borrow courage from that hall, the energy of the gladiators who fought in the past. The boy explains that, if he survives, he will be promoted and have the sword, and if he dies, the manager can take the sword back. The boy wouldn't be stubborn like a child, and if there was any problem, the manager just had to say so. He just wanted to obtain the bare minimum of courage. The manager says that, out of respect for the rules and to preserve that space, he cannot ignore the youth's sincerity and will fulfill his wish. Arhan worries if the manager will get in trouble for it, but he guarantees he has authority over it. Tom says it is hard to see such determined gladiators and cannot control his tears, joking that the older he gets, the more of a crybaby he becomes. The youth thanks him. His master is impressed by his pupil's conversation and says that if Arhan had become an actor, he would have been famous. With that, the conditions were met, and all that remained now was to digest the power of that sword. The next night, everyone anxiously awaited the little gladiator and the Black Bride. The arena woman wanted the bride to sabotage the fight. Cutting off his arm and leg was a request from the planners, as that would make things more interesting for the audience. The bride says she would not accept that kind of proposal. The arena woman says she already knew that, so her offer was to give the Eastern Continent dragon sword as a reward, a high-value item and one of the reasons the bride became a gladiator. The woman takes the gladiator's silence as a yes and asks for a good spectacle. It was an offer she couldn't refuse as a human and not a gladiator. It was the only mercy she could show. In the end, the bride saw that the little gladiator came. She draws her sword and notices there was something extremely strange about the smell of blood exuding from the gladiator. He was a popular resident of the city who had intentionally stained himself with blood. That place had separated from the ruined ancient republic and had become one of the 6 free cities, which at one point in history was called Paradise. However, how history talks about this place is not important. It is not possible to live in the past there, because in the present, it is a place where freedom and hope do not exist. It was nothing more than a horrific land, and it all had started with the corruption of the nobles. It was a greed that never ended, and so they sold the city's territory to foreign powers, the Golden Empire, using the citizens' human rights to borrow massive amounts of gold from the Red Bank. That ended up resulting in the loss of rights and dignity for the citizens, and everyone ended up becoming slaves. In this reality, he always asked himself why. His father was beaten to death for asking tourists for food. His mother sold her body so they wouldn't starve. His sister died of a fever because they didn't have money for treatment. He questioned why he should be stuck living in the present like that. He found the answer in an unexpected place, in front of a guillotine at an execution site. That young man was accused of harassment. He was a city citizen who couldn't stand being tormented by drunken tourists' attacks anymore and chose to resist. Spilling blood was normal in the city, but a foreigner as a victim was something new. To ease the anger of the rich and poor, they carried out an execution as an example. That was brutal violence, but for the man who was a neighbor, there was no room for sympathy. The bloodshed would become worse because of this pretext, as they feared the screams would increase. But the next day, in the streets of the city, there were no screams. It was peaceful and seemingly quiet. That rare silence persisted, and the reason was quite simple. In the eyes of foreigners, the incident that day made the citizens who were treated as mere slaves become dangerous beings who were just hiding their sharp fangs. That could break the stereotypes about them, but they realized they were also accomplices to all the violence and despair in the city. That accusation was simple: the sin of not resisting. Freedom has a price. Someone must shed blood, and someone must have their blood shed. He decided to become that someone to ensure the freedom that belonged to everyone, for all the atonement they must endure, and for paradise. We then see the announcer talking about the great spectacle between the bride and the little gladiator, and he asks for the match to begin. The bride notices the boy completely changed his behavior, looking like he had a lot of blood on his hands. A true assassin. A difficult situation to understand, but to her, nothing had changed. The bride charges at the boy and tries to hit him, but the young man dodges the attack. She is impressed by how he dodged that, as it was too strange. The youth was a completely different being. The girl says his breathing and movements even seemed to belong to someone else, and wonders what the hell that boy was. Our hero attacks the bride with a sequence of attacks. The girl realizes it's as if she were fighting a mercenary and an assassin at the same time. The youth's stances constantly changed, which made it hard to predict what would happen. That boy had surpassed a beginner's level long ago, but it was nothing more than recklessness. The bride expected him to have more tricks up his sleeve. The audience went wild with the fight between the two and commented among themselves who the winner would be. Whatever happened, the youth couldn't have a boring death. The young man exuded an extremely cold, killing intent, which affected even the soul itself, and a strong smell of blood that seemed to cover the whole place. That was the world the old master used to see. His master says that mercenary swordsman was an assassin of crowds, and even though sword wielders had lived in different ways, the weapons shared a common trait. They were forged to fight those stronger than you. The old man also says that in a world where the strong devour the weak, accepting a life of an assassin was very complicated for the youth who just took his first steps. His master asks him not to be consumed by that desire. The youth needs to understand and accept his own life, because the true challenge would begin. The girl had understood his capabilities during that brief clash, and was going to hunt him with everything she has. The arena was a place where there wasn't even a bush to hide, cutting his skills in half. The young man could not wait for his opponent to lower her guard, and in that situation, it was better to secure an advantageous distance. The 3-minute time limit was in his favor. The girl advances on our hero, and in an unbelievable instant, the distance was shortened. Tom realizes the youth doesn't know the true power of a swordwalker. They project a path to suppress their opponents, which is not just building an advantageous territory, but rather using a tremendous internal power. This type of knight became a true superhuman. The girl attacks, the youth manages to dodge, and the two end up clashing their weapons. The youth is surprised by the girl's speed, which was no longer the same as at the start of the duel, and by the true power of the Black Bride. Normal fencing inevitably left openings the moment the stance was reset. However, the Black Bride's sword did not have that opening. Even if it seemed to be stopping, the next attack was already coming. It was almost as if she were painting the world on a canvas with a master painter's brushstrokes. His master explains that the swordsmen from the east use a fencing known as martial arts, which connects like a drawing of beautiful curves. As it strikes, it looks like a wave, and the moment it stops is the last moment to deliver the end. The girl advances, thinking she finally caught the boy. That city had turned into a rotten land, and it was a life dedicated to recovering freedom, with death right by the neck against the corrupt bureaucrats of that land. He carried the burden of fleeing, and life was running. However, there will not always be a way out. That opponent was someone he wouldn't even dare to face, an undeniably powerful being. At that instant, the young man knew his life had come to an end, but then a small circle had appeared. For some reason, this circle appeared in the same way as the twisted alleys full of people he was familiar with. That was an opening and a way to survive in the dirt land like a sewer. His brothers used to call him a genius. The bride says the boy had passed through that path and escaped in that fraction of a second, and wonders what he was going to do now. The girl was an extremely powerful opponent, more so than anyone else he had faced. The dagger owner's opponents were also powerful, but there was a difference in the bride. The boy avoided a fatal wound, but with fractured ribs, creating distance would be impossible. The right choice for him to make would be to give up, even if the end was humiliating. Saving his life would allow him to gain other chances. The boy remembers he is a caravan, and that such a weak option does not exist. The spectators thought it was incredible that the boy, even being bronze, had wounded the Black Bride. That fight was no longer an execution ceremony, but rather the birth of a star. The announcer asks everyone if they saw what was happening, as the remaining time for the little gladiator's victory was only 10 seconds. Geniuses are those who, even amidst difficulty, always find an impossible answer. Clearly, our hero achieved success and engraved his achievements in history. His master says it is a pity, but the boy's talent does not match a genius's because his body is fragile and he has difficulty learning fast, which is the limit of the vessel he was born with. However, there are those in the world who are above geniuses, who might not even find the perfect answer, but they never give up. The legends. The hero of tribulation, Arhan Caravan, even losing everything and being left alone in an abyss without light, never let go of his sword. Our hero possesses the qualities to become a true hero. The girl notices his bizarre dancer-like movements and drives the sword into his chest, but he did not fall behind. Lion says there's no need to be disappointed, as the match is finished and the little gladiator overcame. The victory was his. The announcer declares the little gladiator will be promoted to silver, and the crowd goes wild over the spectacle. As expected, the boy had sparked curiosity in the bride, and it had been a while since she was so excited. Suddenly, the bride hears the arena woman's voice saying, "That is not part of the contract." So she couldn't receive the reward unless she tore off the boy's arm as a trophy. If she desired the dragon sword so much, she needed to do it. The bride sheathes her sword and intends to stay away from there for a while when a blue aura takes over the arena. She cannot understand what that aura is and thinks she is hallucinating until Master Lion appears. He says that is something unexpected and he doesn't understand the reason, but it seems the girl can see him. The master says there are people called shamans who can sense spirits, and that the girl's aptitude is truly surprising. The bride doesn't believe her eyes, but notices the mind sword, the symbol of a sword master. That master manifested the 10 swords and ascended to the position of the greatest swordsman. Before her were thousands of swords covering the sky. The ancestor says she is not ready for the answers, but has potential, and says the absolute destination for all swords is the land of swords. The old man disappears, anxious to reunite with her. Someone calls for Yun. The legend says that when someone masters the sword, they reach the heavens and the land where the immortals live, welcoming them in the paradise of pure happiness. If someday her family reunites there, she would have no regrets. The girl is shocked. The legend her father told was true. The god of swords. Our hero was in the recovery room and couldn't believe what the girl had just told him. She said her real name was Seolyun, and that she wished to follow the young man to reach the pinnacle of the sword. The youth stands confused as to whether that was a new setup. His master says it is no surprise. The girl was completely captivated by him, and everyone who wields the sword becomes his follower just by catching a glimpse of his shadow. The old master feels pity for the boy for being bound to a destiny marked by suffering and a bloody past. Lion says he must judge if the value of Seolyun's sword is real. She had shown goodwill, and, as a genius recognized by the master himself, will serve as a great inspiration and help. The young man says his name and welcomes her as a neighbor. The girl smiles and says she is anxious to work with him. The protagonist wants to clarify some things for his new companion. He understands the complicated circumstances, but warns that he cannot be her boyfriend and that they are both young and don't know where life goes. She then starts to roast him, talking about everything she prefers in a man and that he lacks. Besides everything, the impression he gave off was of someone soft who apologizes first. The youth, after being trashed, says it's fine already. The girl asks if there are other people in his village. The boy replies there is a knight who moved in recently, whom she would get along with because of his skill and gentle personality. The youth asks her about her luggage being so small. She says she doesn't carry much, just the sword, food, and if she needs something, she searches for it. She notices the boy increased his luggage. He explains that in the last fight the blade was completely damaged, so he got spare swords and, thanks to his increased earnings, bought the armor he needed. The armor was incredibly expensive, and his master told him to stop crying. Upon arriving at the mansion, he comes face to face with Patel, who had just smashed several bandits, and explains that uninvited people arrived recently. The knight notices the girl and is embarrassed to show such a deplorable sight on their first meeting. The youth asks him to calm down and relax, while the girl observes that the place is not normal. Patel recounts that the problem started a week ago when people began attacking the village. He tried to send them away, but they attacked, forcing the knight to shed blood. The information indicated they were not ordinary bandits. They were part of the Red Wolf Brotherhood. The youth questions this name. The girl explains that for bandits to use a name like that, the group is either extremely large or the leader is so skilled he looks down on knights. The master then asks the youth to wipe out the bandits alone, without the neighbor's help. The master says the forged steel body gets stronger with hammering, being the best opportunity to digest the fang's power and to extend his own path. The youth then asks Patel where the bandits' hideout is. In the Iron Kingdom, in the south, in the mountain range, a gang of bandits cannot understand their captain's taste, as there seemed to be no treasure there. One bandit says maybe the rumors circulating in the area attracted his interest. The place was abandoned, falling apart, and with nothing to loot. They decide to head back to the last village and go after more women. When, suddenly, in the blink of an eye, the necks of those bandits were brutally shredded. One of them comes across the true carnage and, without understanding, has his heel pulled by the boy, who hides a knife and demands silence. The bandit realizes it is not a necromancer, but rather a child with different eyes. The young man threatens the bandit for information. Earlier, Arhan had asked Patel about the hideout's combat style and characteristics, but Patel tried to dissuade him from acting alone, saying defense is the best strategy. The youth and the girl helped Patel, who didn't look well at all and was coughing. Patel feared for the youth due to the gang's tricks up their sleeve. The protagonist apologizes and says it is a promise he cannot keep. The master realizes the boy got used to the laws of the Iron Kingdom. The boy says he won't leave any loose ends. Arhan talks with his master, explaining that the captain of those bandits is no ordinary human. In knight orders, he is known as the runaway dog, a deserter knight, and a sword walker. The master says that doesn't matter at all. Patel, meanwhile, was dreaming of a lady who fully trusted his loyalty as an escort knight and asked for his protection. The dream is interrupted by a troop of knights. The vice captain Miken from the elephant troop asks Patel and Seolyan if they know the whereabouts of the runaway dog. Our heroes are approached by the elephant troop. Patel tells them everything he knows about the Red Wolves. Miken says the rumors reach the capital and despises Patel's information, stating he'll have to do hard work anyway. The knight recognizes Patel from the academy and destroys his reputation, humiliating his former comrade from the loyal Patel to a sick dog abandoned by his master. Miken warns that Patel is already trapped in an unwanted fate, while the girl questions him. The jerk knight mocks Seolyan, saying she is an excellent caregiver, and leaves to pursue his mission. Patel then realizes that Arhan went to the bandits' hideout alone. The bandits were complaining that standing guard at night sucked. Out of the darkness, someone appears asking why the bandit was alone, but in a matter of seconds, his neck was cut along with the rest of the group. The master had chosen the fang over all other weapons because its original owner was not made to fight face-to-face with gladiators or elite knights. In fair fights, his defeat would be guaranteed. However, in a life-or-death fight, he used dirty tricks, attacked weaknesses, and stopped the enemy from breathing first to survive. The assassin focused entirely on that. He never assumed success, always kept failure in mind to plan a calculated victory, being someone who constantly suspected. And while that bandit was drunk, a dagger flew straight into his forehead. To ensure a perfect result, Arhan hunted the wolves in the dark, smelling the scent of blood. At the camp, a bandit panics upon seeing that the companions he drank with shortly before were dead. The colleague yells that it is not just there, and the strangest thing is that there were no signs of a struggle. They died without knowing what hit them. They are impressed by the skill of whoever did that. Captain Murphy appears asking for his drink and telling them to shut up. He smells blood, notices the slaughter, and states it will be fun to bite the rat to death. The master asks the boy what he thought after observing the captain's mana path, and the protagonist says he can kill him. The path is the core that transforms any walker into a superhuman. Patel's path possessed countless branches creating an immense wall, and Ms. Seolyun's was elegant, moving fiercely like a furious wave. Murphy's, however, had 6 very unstable branches. Lion says it is normal, as the girl is a once-in-a-100-years genius, and Patel, even sick, had reached the peak. The master warns it is not enough to determine life and death, and Arhan replies not to worry, as he will not lower his guard. The bandits ask the captain what to do, thinking it to be the work of necromancers. Murphy retorts that the dead were struck in vital points with perfection, and suspects a skilled assassin was hired by the elephants, by a revenge-seeking family, or by caravan survivors he beat up. He sends his henchmen after the assassin and swears to torture him until he is tired. Murphy goes into a fury upon seeing more of his men dead and the campfires put out. The captain grits his teeth hunting for the assassin when, from the shadows, an attack emerges. Murphy realizes that if he had been a second slower, he would have lost his head. Now fighting against the darkness, a true assassin of crowds. The scene shifts to the mountains in the middle of the night. 2 people were walking. Sir Patel was somewhat out of breath, telling the Black Bride they couldn't stop since they needed to find the young master. After all, those bandits are absolutely not an enemy. They can face alone, and even with the young master's talent, he's just a sprout that's barely been born. The bride stays quiet, listening to him say Arhan needed to grow before facing a sword wanderer. The scene shows the trees as the bride replies that she doesn't think that's true. She explains that Arhan isn't a mere sprout. Sir Patel is startled by the bride's answer as she says, "His talent has already begun to bloom," she finishes, as our hero's silhouette appears in the shadows. Murphy was approaching, judging Arhan's appearance as that of a fairly expensive assassin. He asks who sent him and kicks him, asking if it was a merchant group they'd robbed or even the women they'd discarded. Arhan listens to him finally mention the damned yellow elephant. Murphy says it'd be better for him to answer obediently. Meanwhile, the moon gleamed and footsteps drew closer as Murphy looked up at the sky. Arhan slowly approaches, wielding his 2 daggers. Murphy stares at him without a word, studying something, until he bursts out laughing, since the one who'd wiped out all his men was nothing more than a child who hadn't even stopped wearing diapers. He rubs his beard, saying, "This really is," before suddenly gritting his teeth, saying this is truly absurd. Then he shouts that it's time for a change of plans. Arhan remains still as something approaches him. In the blink of an eye, Murphy is about to strike our hero. The blow closes in on his neck, but Arhan starts to open his mouth. Suddenly, an impact shoves Murphy back. He's confused, wondering if he'd really missed, until he takes a cut to the shoulder, and right after, one to his abdomen. Arhan was already behind him as Murphy slowly collapses. He looks back, with no time to react, and Murphy doesn't hesitate and attacks again, but the blood sprays once more. No matter what he does, Murphy realizes Arhan is literally vanishing. Besides that, in a split second, he even crosses right through his path, until finally our hero appears again, having forced an opening. When it comes to raw power, he was never the strongest. That's why, to face countless powerful enemies, he needed to borrow the power of his ally. The prerequisite for that was to make his presence known, his breathing, the friction of his clothes, and even every single step he takes. He exaggerates every part of his presence. Then, the instant the enemy notices and focuses every sense of his body on it, he erases it all at once. A sudden, extreme contrast in perception. The result, total confusion of the 5 senses. They'd break out in a nervous sweat until a drop of that sweat falls onto the tip of the blade. And just like that, Arhan was already behind the enemy. The other companion watches the blood spray and sees his ally collapse to the ground. Our hero reveals himself in the shadows, and through this he becomes the darkness itself. The scene returns to him attacking Murphy. He senses something is wrong and wonders if the flow of this battle should really be this one-sided. It seems strange to say it was just because of his digestion of the assassin's memories, but if he's hiding something, then our hero charges forward, aiming his dagger at his opponent. Murphy stares at him with a firm expression. Arhan notices this and is startled by it. Suddenly, the 2 of them collide, and there they stood, face to face. Murphy had immobilized one of his daggers, blocking the strike with his teeth.